So for several Sundays this summer, Pastor Diana and Carla have been reading us stories. And I don't know about you, but I love being read to, especially if I've heard the story before. There's something special that happens during reading time. There's an intimacy between the listener and the story, and we're liberated to give our imagination free rein. And maybe with this freedom, we discover something new, something that we didn't know before, or we didn't notice in the story, or we experience a character differently than we did before. And in our minds, according to my friend and our friend, Rebecca Schroeder, there's something that she calls the white space in a familiar story, which is another way of saying that there is always room to explore the story for what isn't said or isn't written. And when we put a story into our own words, we bring that story closer to us in context that could make it more applicable to life today. So as part of the Isaiah Project here in 2023, one of the activities that we did was to take a Bible story and put it in our own words. And the goal was to use language and context that could bring a story into the present, helping to make the story matter and feel relevant today. I was given the passage in John 4, which you just heard Patty read, about the woman at the well. And I tentatively stepped into that white space of that encounter. I have renamed "A Samaritan Woman and a Jewish Man Walk into a Bar." So Jesus had been minding his own business in Judea for a while now. And in that time, he got wind of talk behind his back. It seems the high Judean mucky-mucks were gossiping about how many people Jesus was snagging for his cult, going so far as to baptize more people than even John the Baptist. Jesus knew that it was his disciples who did the baptisms, but gossip doesn't really care about the truth. The Judean countryside suddenly felt awfully cramped, and Jesus decided his best course of action would be to leave hoity-toity Judea and go back up to Galilee, where life was simpler and quieter. There were less headaches. But getting to Galilee, however, would take him through Samaria, which is the area sandwiched between Galilee on the north, Samaria, and then Judea on the south. And Jesus decided that the shortcut that he would take through Samaria would be worth the hardship and the awkwardness he might encounter along the way. Well, who's to say that encounter that he was about to have wasn't just why he was there? One especially hot day on the road, with the sun blistering his head and feet, Jesus was nearing the town of Sychar, but because he was feeling heat stroke coming on, he stopped short of town and he pulled into the nearest fringe bar called The Well, where he could take a load off, rest, find some refreshment. It was only about noon, so he knew that the bar wouldn't be too crowded or too loud, though it still gave off an aura of, "This is where men find their future wives." Since his pals had gone ahead into town to buy deli sandwiches and pickles for lunch, he was alone and already anticipating more alone time. He'd just settled back in the back booth when he saw a Samaritan woman who came in to get something to drink and to fill up a couple of jugs that she was toting. She stood and looked around furtively, and at first she didn't see the man in the back booth. Nonetheless, she was glad not to see anyone who might heckle her or harass her or berate her or call her a tainted woman, which happened to her on a pretty regular basis. She nodded hello to the bartender, Joe, walked to the jukebox, put in her shekel, punched in the same sad song she always chose, C14, And Joe felt a pang of sympathy for her, as he always did, remembering the leering and the catcalls she regularly got whenever she came in. Yet over time, because she did come into the well every day, bit by bit, chat by chat, Joe had gotten her story. The first man she married had cut his foot with a scythe during the harvest, and he died from an infection that set in. That was number one. The second husband, as was the custom, was the brother of the first man. But custom wasn't enough to make a happy marriage, so he divorced herself, that would be number two, and she found herself married to the youngest brother, be number three. The marriage ended after he contracted an illness. Poor woman was having a tough time. He contracted an illness and died shortly after the nuptials. Her hot-headed fourth husband got in a row with a Roman soldier, and he died by the blade. And husband number 5, well, he was just a jerk. No matter how you looked at it, always trying to beat some sense into her. He'd walked out without giving her a divorce, and Joe the bartender knew that she had finally found a good man, kind and loving, and even though they were unable to marry due to asshole number 5, pardon my French, they were living together and they were doing it while trying to keep to themselves. A woman rode hard and put away wet, sighed Joe. When the woman was just about to ask Joe for her usual, she heard a voice from the darkness of the back booth say, "While you're up, get me some water to drink?" No small talk, no, "What's your name? Do you live around here? Where do you come from?" Nope, none of that. He got right to the point, and yet his voice was somehow compelling without being judgmental. She could tell by his accent he wasn't from Samaria, and walking back to get a better look at the man who spoke, she saw that he was dressed like a Jew. Startled, the woman said the first thing that popped into her head, "Why are you, a Jewish man, asking for something to drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" At the minimum, the man was breaking the racial and cultural boundaries by addressing her, but what she was really wondering about was why someone would talk to her so kindly, used as she was to ridicule. Since Jesus already had his reputation for bucking status quo, he was immediately ready with a rejoinder. "If you could only see the gift my dad has put in front of you and who is asking you for water, you wouldn't ask for a drink from the well. Instead, you'd be asking me for the kind of drink that isn't sold in a bar, the kind that permanently quenches your thirst for good." Noting that the man didn't have a glass of anything in front of him on his table, the woman challenged him. "What? Aren't you drinking? Do you think you're better than Jacob, the original owner of the well? He dug way down, past the lint in his pockets, to build this bar. And solid craftsmanship, the cellar's at least 100 feet deep, perfect for keeping beverages at a cool, even temperature. And he drank here, as did his sons, and who do you think you are?" Jesus calmly said, "Everyone who gets a drink here at the well will be thirsty again. But if you take the drink I offer you, you will never be thirsty again. The water I offer you will act, in those who drink it, like a spring that bubbles up inside you and has no need of a bar like the well. In fact, those who drink what I offer will become like artesian springs, gushing fountains of endless life." Well, he was fond of using similes when he spoke. Whoa, 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 she thought. What the heck is he talking about? Yet that kind of drink sounded not only refreshing, but it would keep her from having to come to the well every day to lug something to drink back to her family. After wiping the sweat from her face and her neck, she surprised herself by the words that now came out of her mouth. She said, "Sir, give me this drink, so that I will never be thirsty again and will never need to come back to the well." It seemed impossible that such a drink existed, but if it did, she thought it could free her from the painful daily treks into town, where she faced the ridicule and the rebuffs met her every time. What Jesus said next really took her by surprise. He told her, "Go get your husband and come back here." And his comment threw her into the familiar territory of damaged goods, because in those days, women had to acquiesce to whatever man wanted. And she thought about her repeated marriages and what this man might think of her. But she decided to take a chance on Jesus and responded with, I don't have a husband." To her amazement, Jesus countered by saying, "You're right to say you don't have a husband. You've actually had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not your husband. So you've spoken the truth." The woman's mouth just dropped open. But Jesus spoke her truth back to her with compassion streaming from his eyes and his voice. She thought with a start, "He already knows about my past. How is that possible? Why would he show such kindness to me knowing what I've done?" Jesus could read her unspoken thoughts, and he knew how dearly she longed for fulfillment in her life and how intensely she was seeking it, trying to make peace with all those years spent riddled with guilt and abiding shame. Taken aback by Jesus' prescience, and perhaps maybe trying to deflect attention from herself, she replied, "Sir, you must be a prophet. All my people have worshipped here on this mountain, but you and your people say it's necessary to worship in Jerusalem." And because he knew her heart and her deepest spiritual needs, Jesus spoke to her with healing attention. "Believe me, dear woman, a time is coming. In fact, it's already here, where what you are called will not matter, and where you go to worship will not matter. What does matter and what will matter is that you worship with your whole self, with whoever you are, knowing that God loves you as you are. Your worship must engage your spirit in the pursuit of truth." In the back of the woman's astute mind, a dim light began to brighten. And she said, "I know that the Messiah is coming, the one who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will teach everything you're talking about to us, even to people the world loves to hate," she thought. The man in the dark booth added, "I am the one who speaks to you now. You don't have to wait any longer." The room crystallized into a single moment in time, filled only with the two of them, inhaling the deep understanding that was flowing between them. That was the position Jesus' disciples found them in when they arrived with lunch. They were shocked to see the master talking with that kind of woman, but they had the good sense not to question him. They could see that this was indeed a moment. At the bar, Joe had put down the glasses he was cleaning, and he was watching. Suddenly, compelled to share what had just happened to her, the woman dropped her water jugs on the floor, nearly turned tables upside down as she blew past Joe out into the heat and ran back to the city. She was out of breath by the time she got there, but instead of fearing people's recriminations, she was so excited that she gasped, "Hey, you guys, I gotta share this thing that just happened to me. Let me take you to see a man who, though we'd never met, he told me everything I've done in my life. Impossible, right? But it happened. Come to the well with me and see. He might be the Christ." Her evident thirst fueled their own hunger. So instead of jeering and rebuking, the people who heard her followed her to see this Jesus. As a postscript, I will say that the woman who came to the well went on to be baptized by the apostles, and she was given the name Photini, which in Greek means bright and shining. And after the well, Photini took up the mantle to fearlessly preach the gospel of Jesus and was known to be on equal footing with the apostles, recognized as one of the enlightened. Today, she's considered a saint in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. May it be so. Amen.